like 2 inches of friggin' snow last night, April 9th. It sucks. Even worse, I have a bored dog. Hey, Goof. She's been sitting there with her jaw out the window for about a couple of hours now, just kind of, I don't want to go outside because it sucks. Hey, Goof. That weather's stupid, eh? Yeah. You might as well take a nap. And it is +3, but it's so damp right now. Okay. Unlike many other countries on the planet right now, we're close to a balanced budget. Now, in this new budget, there's a new provision to make it illegal for governments, if there's other governments after, to actually run up a deficit, which is kind of more of a symbolistic thing. Here's why. The next government that gets in undoes that law, you know what I mean? But the idea is that federally, we don't go to the kind of the Trudeau years and the spend in the early 70s, and then by the end of the 70s, everybody's pretty much out of a job, and, big recession and stuff like that. So they don't want that to happen. And now the funny thing is that, yes, the conservative government is actually not conservative. They're socialist fascists is what they are. Business and state in bed together, or business and state in bed together, you have fascism. I mean, they're all, Harper's a globalist. He's not a conservative, he's a globalist. Most countries are globalist right now anyway, which is where most of our problems are coming from. These big corporations out there that keep getting bailouts and stuff like that, the reason why is because they keep so many people employed, but the problem with that is that if they were making money, a lot of these big corporations can't actually make money. If they're making money, it'd be no problem. But the thing is, as soon as they get into trouble, the government bails them out. Keep going, I've already petted you. I petted you. And she's extorting petting from me. But the idea is that, all these governments have basically used, driving their dollar to the bottom by everyday low prices of getting stuff built by the cheapest stuff from the lowest bidder, outsourcing all the labor of their countries and manufacturing, and insourcing to undercut the labor. So it's no surprise when, country after country pretty much suffers like massive debt and just living on debt, And the other thing too is that there's no opportunities for people here. So if you were to say, okay, get rid of NAFTA, get rid of the North American Union, which is kind of in full swing. All these things come in under the radar. The average person has no idea, what happened to their job. And students can't find new work and stuff to get good jobs. That said, if your budget's balanced, most people won't notice that right away because, the taxes won't be as insane, stuff like that. So they are pretty much, for all intensive purposes, Canada does have a balanced budget. We were never that far over anyway, compared to any other country. Like 2008, yeah, we took a hit, like everybody else did, with all the bailouts and stuff like that. But the thing is that, we're a long way from Greece and Spain federally. Provincially, that's a different story. I mean, major cuts have to come to every province. And of course, you have people out there in Alberta. There's a lady who wants to run for the NDP saying, we got to invest in this, invest in that. She doesn't understand. You are broke now. You can't invest in anything. You have to cut. And I don't know which way it's going to go in Alberta, but I don't think the NDP is going to get as far as they think. Well, when people think of reality, it's like, okay, yeah, I get what they're saying, yeah, invest in schools and stuff like that, but you can only do that if you have the money to do it. And this is the same thing we're experiencing here in Quebec, is you have all these leftist students that are saying, don't cut our education, don't cut our education. They don't get it, that the government has spent like drunken sailors here, particularly the previous government. Look, because the Liberal government that was in Quebec got ousted by the Parti Québécois, Bloc Québécois, Parti Québécois. Yeah, they're two different parties, but they're the same thing, their goals are the same. And they're extremely, extremely left, almost to the point of Marxism. Well, you might as well say Marxism, because in a lot of ways they are. With that going on, they've run up, massive amount of debts in Quebec. Ontario, same problem. They think they can spend their way out of the problem, but you can't. And it's in 2008. It was when the bankers said, "Okay, yeah, pay us back now." That's when the whole thing fell apart. So the bankers can cause the trouble anytime they want. But it's this, basically low interest rates, and pretty much borrow to live, that gets everybody in trouble. The next thing is wickedly, stupidly spending of an irresponsibility. We need a basic, massive audit of the entire government, all the federal, again, every single employee, every single program. That has to be done. We've got to start cutting things. Provincially, it has to be done. For example, here's Quebec talking about taking 6 years to balance its budget, so to dampen the blow. Already, prices of things are going up. Hunting licenses and fishing licenses have almost doubled, and yet they're talking about doing things like $30 million into a gun registry, which will probably cost another $3 billion. If the Liberal government now is saying $30 million will put in a new gun registry. I mean, it used to. The first Liberal government that put it in said it was going to cost $2 million, so they were off by only something like $3 billion. So you get the idea. It's going to be a slush fund for something. $75 million every year that we know of into Bill 101 or the language police here in Quebec. So if there's something you want to cut to balance the budget in Quebec, you start there. People don't want that stuff anyway. Even the francophones don't want that. Again, it's only really a handful of the province. Maybe it's less than a third of the province, or even less than a quarter of the province. That's for separation. But yet it holds so much power. Again, always catering to the minority. And in Alberta, they're talking about 10 years to balance the budget. That's a hell of a hit. It doesn't mean the sky is going to fall overnight, but it does mean that we're living outside our means. Now in Ontario, they're talking about getting more money for Ontario, but there's no more money to be had. This is the thing. So and you credit where credit's due. I mean, even if you don't like the Harper government, you have to say they did keep us off the rocks in comparison to a lot of other countries. Again, there's always, for the bad they do. Again, if it wasn't for the globalism thing, Harper actually wouldn't be a bad prime minister. Again, he's not a charismatic guy, but he keeps the ship off the rocks. Can't say that in Greece, Spain, or Italy. You can't say that in most of Europe. Socialism is an entitlement mentality. Ontario probably has it just as bad as Quebec, but Ontario's budget, if they don't get any more money, they're going to have to start shrinking the government. Problem is that's the biggest problem in the country, is that there's so much socialism that we've pretty much forsaken our private sector for the public sector. And when it comes pension time for a lot of these people, they're going to get a real big shock when those pensions aren't there, just like's happening overseas. So with this new budget that they're coming out with, I think around April 20th or whatever, another 10 days, one of the things they said was they would not run a deficit unless it was something of extreme, so I guess a financial collapse or a war. So and war is very, very likely right now. Best way to get out of paying your creditors, or to, again, the bankers would rather blame an economic collapse on a war than themselves, right? Because these people be lucky. In the 1990s, we actually threw corrupt bankers in jail. Now we give them more money and tell them keep doing what you're doing and do it faster. So big changes, right? But that said, we're still way better off than the States. Again, even if the economy in the States collapses, yes, it will hit us and we'll go into an instant depression here, but we're still not as far out of the we're much further out of the hole than what any other country is. And if we balance our budget, we can start paying down our deficit. So that's a good thing. Now people say, yeah, but it's taken them 10 years to do this. And the Liberals had a balanced budget each time. Yeah, they did, but it was the Liberals that got us into a war. Again, one new boss, same as the old boss. It's just the details change, that's all. But the difference is that, yes, the Conservative government has been doing austerity. Problem is they do the austerity on the people and not the corporations. This is where the problems are. But it's still better than having to pay for another bailout. Now, that said, because of every pretty much Western country, whether they're in Europe or North America, pretty much every one of them has a bail-in clause like Cyprus, meaning the banks can just steal your money out of the bank if they get into trouble. It's legal now. It's you can't even make that stuff up. So if that happens, the next government that experiences that is going to have, the Cypriots, they took it quite well, but that's a very small country, and Russia's kind of helped them out a bit since then. But if we see it in North America, you have to understand the 2008 collapse was supposed to happen in the United States, but they diverted it to Europe, and the euro took the hit. Because if it would have done it in the States, it actually would have been worse off. But the States is insolvent. It's worse than Greece or Spain. $18 trillion deficit, the next budget they pass, you know, is going to go up to $22 trillion. I mean, it's then after that, it's just going to start to skyrocket. And people are starting to notice that they're becoming more poor. Inflation is hitting. The government says, oh no, well, iPods are as cheap as they've ever been. They don't count inflation there. They count that as no inflation. But if you add up the things, cost of living, that's a different story. Fuel, food, hydro, anything like that, gas, anything to do with resources is through the moon. Like I said about the fuel prices, with the oil drop. I mean, again, Saudi Arabia does a 4-month hit on oil, and it's going to take 10 years for Alberta from a half province. In 4 months, they went to, okay, it's going to take us 10 years to balance our budget. What does that tell you? You know what I mean? What does that tell you about globalism? Why should we even be in OPEC in the first place? Well, I'll tell you why. It's the petrodollar. But that might change in the very near future, especially with the currency war between China and the United States. And, pretty much China unofficially, you might as well say, has a second reserve currency. So I don't trust the Chinese. They doctor the books just as much as the Americans. And it's not really the Americans. It's the banking systems. It's the banking systems. We're run by elite bankers in every country. This is the problem. Hence, I'll give you an example. The lawsuit between the Bank of Canada to restore the Bank of Canada to its former, basically crediting money into existence, not loaning it into existence. Which, if the Conservative government did that, that would be a hell of a reason to vote for them. I don't think they will. Again, there's will and can't. If we did that right away, depending on how this lawsuit actually plays out, but you have to understand too, it's one of the biggest stories Canadians could be, a huge thing for Canadians, and yet the CBC doesn't even cover it. They won't even mention it. Why? Because again, the banks pretty much control the media and stuff like that. So if we had basically money credited into existence rather than loaned into existence with debt, this would put a big wrangle on all the basically runaway banks that we have. But this would almost overnight collapse all these too big to fail banks, or as I say, too complicated to work. So that's why, if it does happen, I don't think it will. I'm sure that judge has been paid off by now. So yeah, don't let it happen. But it's a big case for the people. And that's what they need to do in the States. That's what they need to do everywhere. The problem is you go and solve it the second that happens if you don't have a balanced budget and you don't have, if you have massive debt and you're printing money like mad stink, That said, the Conservative government, most of their spending choices have been kind of conservative. So you got to give credit where credit's due. Problem is with the austerity, what are they cutting? They cut the little people first, and then they'll cut the cronyism. As far as the Senate and stuff like that, the Senate, yes, of course, the NDP would love to be able to open the Constitution. This is why they won't open the Constitution or get rid of the Senate, is because of the Constitution. And the Harper government has came out and said there's no scam here. They've said that right from the get-go. Look, in order to do that, we have to open the Constitution. Once that thing's open, it's very hard. Then this group wants to open it. Then that group wants to open it, which could be good. But the way I look at it, it would actually probably backfire, especially under an NDP government. The revisions they would probably do to our Constitution would pretty much make us slaves overnight, worse than what we are. So what happened if the Bank of Canada did get restored? Well, the possibilities are, well, number one, that pretty much wrangles the government into keeping a balanced budget. It also does another thing, because they can't just print money like Zimbabwe. It's the way the Bank of Canada used to work before Trudeau basically, gave it the axe. He basically, you could only print so much money, percentage of your GDP and stuff like that. So it wasn't, you couldn't just print money left, right, and center. Probably for emergencies, you could probably do a little bit, but then it would balance each year. And it could even get to the point, if we got out of foreign policy things, such as sending, $400 million to the IMF, $400 million, we've sent $450 million to the Ukraine. I have no idea why, really. It's not about democracy over there. There's a lot more going on. I don't know what we've invested in. Harper just spent money on a telescope in Hawaii. it's going to be over a bunch of years. And it's, like anything with the space program and stuff like that. So some of these things, okay, well, maybe that's not a great place to be putting money right now. But it's still within a budget. But the thing is once you have a budget, that's when you start looking at getting away the wasteful spending to lower taxes. Hopefully they will start doing that at some point. The next thing is, black swan events like the Saudi Arabian oil hit, as we'll call it. And again, look, oil prices are as low as they've been, but look at the cost of oil, or cost of gas, it's going up, just like I said it would. That's going to skyrocket through the roof. Here in Quebec, I mean, the taxes are going up, the province is broke. So the problem is that all the governments would rather raise taxes than actually cut government, and they need to do that. Government unions are too big. They're just way, way too big. It's all these entitlements. I mean, the average government employee costs about $140,000 a year when you add up benefits and everything. On top of that, the average government employee makes between 17 and 37% more than the average private sector of equivalent kind of jobs. And on top of that, you've got, of the 1%ers in Canada, basically is if you make $100,000 or more, you're in the 1% of Canadians. Think about that. Out of 33.5 million people, and God knows what we're up to now, maybe 36 million, only 1% makes 100,000. And if you said like 10 or 15% of the country made 100,000, then that'd be, but that's how little growth we actually do have, is people aren't getting more wealthy, they're just kind of stagnating. And our economy's been hugging that line of growth, at the speed of smell. Growth is growth, sure. But you can see how far small growth like that can get knocked off its rocker. So what's the solution? Well, deregulation is going to have to happen. Shrinking the governments is going to have to happen. One thing I will say about this government, and again, I'm not giving them a reigning endorsement, I'm just keeping it real, is that scams-wise, almost everything they've had for scams is scandalite. Look, if the worst we have to deal with is Mike Duffy spending 140 grand or whatever it was he spent, that's not bad. Considering the billions and billions between the Mulroney government, billions and billions between the Liberal government, the Martin government, the Chrétien government, and yet these people still walk free. I don't know how, but, again, when you rig the system, I guess. Yeah, they are definitely the lesser of the evils, love them or hate them. The numbers, thing is people don't vote on what they're actually doing. They vote on, how much do I hate this guy versus that guy. That's, people don't vote for people, they vote against people. So for the Harper government to actually keep in power, they're going to have to start pulling a lot of rabbits out of hats. Number one, they're going to have to give the gun owners a hell of a lot. The veterans are going to, the veterans are kind of appeasing a bit, but they got a long way to go there. The best way to appease the veterans is, first off, don't go to war. I don't know why they would have. I could see them going right after an election, but what a politically suicidal thing to do is go to a war. Yeah, people kind of support it, but those things backfire big time at the polls, And, the Liberals, well, they flip-flop so much, it's hard to say which way they'll go. But usually 3 terms after that, you get a new government. My fear is an NDP government. I'm already under an NDP government here in Quebec. And again, prices of everything are going up, taxes are going up. But yet you're not getting more, you get, the only people that really benefit from most social programs in Canada are the government employees. Everybody else is, well, you're going to wait 4 to 6 weeks to find out whether you're eligible. But meanwhile, that person's employed. You know what I mean? That's the way it seems. It may be, that's being a bit harsh, but you get the idea. The hospital wait times now, they're talking about charging people to sit in the wait room, which I can see it as a good thing, so somebody who cuts their finger, or whatever, doesn't just run to the emergency every time they get a sniffle, right? But on the other hand, the people that are poor, and there's a lot of poor people, particularly here in Quebec, because pretty much Quebec's policy is to keep people out of work. They don't want the English to work, so that's why they put on these ridiculous standards. But if they got rid of stuff like that, Quebec could be, well, Quebec is a have province. It's a restricted province. It's resources aren't a problem here. In fact, this province has more resources than most countries of all types. I mean, you name it, it's here. It's a mining, hydro. I mean, it's all here. But rather than sending money into globalism, what we could do, again, use the Bank of Canada. Okay, get everybody back to work. You could have a lot of make-work projects, infrastructure. I mean, one of the biggest things, resources, every country always is kind of stupid on and forgets about, is human labor. That's a resource. You can build things. You can clean things up. You could have a gigantic recycling program for people on welfare. Welfare right away, that needs reforming. Have a work fair. Give them, like, say, maybe 3 months or 6 months to find a job. After that, you find them a job for them. It doesn't have to be full-time, but anything that's close. Some people, yes, they live in areas like me where there's no work. But even myself, considering the lack of work that's around here, I'm still not on any government assistance. I'm not tooting my own horn. It's just I'm able to do that. Some people aren't, So there is ways to get around things. The other thing is, agriculture, I think, is going to be sparking up in Canada again. We got to get away from that kind of debt-based economy, number one. Globalism, we got to kind of step away from that and move towards nationalism, which is, yes, fascistic in a lot of ways. But we got to put Canada first, in jobs and stuff like that. Now, we just got rated something like number 6 of one of the best countries for technology and stuff like that. And we're always one of the best countries for living standard. I think the number 1 was either Norway. I think it went Norway, Sweden, Switzerland. Those guys are always showing off and that kind of stuff, for quality of life. But the rating system is kind of a bit biased onto, for social programs and stuff like that. But they judge us for social programs. Where they say we lack is kind of basically in the environmental stuff, which I really don't find that. Considering the size of our country, most of our environmental taboos are basically the oil sands. That's pretty much what people complain about. But on the other hand, it's the thing that was driving the country for so long. Again, right now, Alberta's a have-not province, meaning transfer payments will not be coming from Alberta to Quebec or Ontario anymore. So at some point, yes, and we're seeing it now, the start of it now, by this time next year, I'm pretty sure Quebec and Ontario are going to have major riots on their hands of people demanding free this, free that. It's like the people in Greece and Spain. Quebec and Ontario were like the Greece and Spain of Canada. Like they've overspent. Government is just way too massive. And there's almost too many restrictions for a person to even think of starting their own business. And that's the key, that labor. Again, get people working sustainably in their own jobs that they created for themselves with no government assistance whatsoever. Hey, then you have something, Allow other industries to compete. For example, hemp. Yeah, you can grow it here, but it's so heavily regulated that nobody can make any money on it because, they don't want you growing that stuff. But look at hemp. What can't you make with it? Stuff like that. And I'm not a dope head or anything like that. And I don't really, but again, anything that can become an economy, let it. Deregulate it. The only thing I would regulate on hemp and stuff like that is basically the water consumption, because we see what's happening in California with all these grow ops that are pretty much draining the rivers there. Those plants use a lot of water. They actually will lower the water table if you're not careful. Same as anything in agriculture, right? But micro farming, I think, is going to be a huge thing in the near future because it's going to be the only thing that people can get into if they have a little bit of land, that type of thing. If they don't have land, there's other ways. Technology, I think, is the next. That's where we need to be kind of investing. So in a way, like with this new space telescope that they're building in Hawaii, I like the idea that we're getting involved in stuff like that because it's technology-based. Right now, our basically unmanned submarines that we're building, they're small. They're only like 20 feet long or 30 feet long. They're basically underwater drones. That type of stuff. Okay, yeah, keep our technology going there. Our technology sector is very advanced in Canada. It's very small. That's the problem. So, there's ways to move forward and in stuff like that and move away from older paradigms. Problem is when the banking system has, a housing-based economy, which is again a real, that Canada's every country should have nothing to do with the banks if they fail. Basically, what did they do in Ontario? And it's not just Ontario; it's all over. They took the green belt, okay, and they turned it into a suburbia. The best lush land in the province, and probably in the country, probably even better than most land in the States for growing, food crops and stuff like that. They take it and they build houses on it. It's the most ridiculous thing. The next thing we need to do is really scale back, on the immigration. It's not that I'm against immigration, but we can't have mass immigration. It's not sustainable. There's not enough good jobs. There's not enough healthcare. The housing, it inflates the housing market. It's too much. This idea of expand, we don't need. How about sustain? Now, if they stay within that, maybe the Conservative government may move in that direction. Because I got to say, even though they have made the government much bigger. Yes, they've run deficit after deficit, but considering 2008 to now, the fact that we didn't hit a collapse like everybody else, you got to give that a lot of credit. It was impossible not to run a deficit, but they have been running a deficit a little bit longer than that. But again, when the Conservatives came in all fairness, they did inherit a war, and even though they were on side with it, it's still a war is going to be the war in Afghanistan was expensive. It was Canada's longest military engagement in history, in our history, and stuff like that. So will Syria turn out the same? Probably not. And the reason why is that they're going to keep a cap on it. Say, okay, we'll have a few people there, but we're not going to get into a big ground war. People don't want. And even with that, consider this. The ground war in Afghanistan was still going on during the Conservative government's last 2 terms. So it's not that the people want war or anything like that in the Middle East. It's just that the alternatives of the NDP it's basically communism. The party got started as communist sympathizers. You listen to Tom Moncaris with that. Right now, he talks a good talk, but again, they talk. There's the things they say when they get elected, and there's the things that they do after they get elected. Obama's a perfect example of that. Obama was supposed to be the savior of humanity. What a disaster that turned out to be, right? Heck, even in 2008, I would have voted for him, but no, not now. 2010 or 2012, the last election. What the hell were people thinking? Mind you, I'm pretty sure that election was rigged. But again, people didn't like Romney as much as they liked Obama, or they hated Romney more than they hated Obama. I don't know why, but at that point, But again, I think it's because they agreed on too many things. So what's the difference? And again, most people didn't show up anyway. So lower voter turnout here in Canada is the same problem. Now that said, making it law to balance budgets, I like the idea of it, but I don't think it's going to be put into practice because symbolistically, no, one little thing happens and we got to pay for this, pay for that. And again, what gets me is when they do austerity on the little people, and this is where I can kind of make things, the protests in Quebec and stuff like that right now for austerity is that okay. Now, mind you, this is provincial, but we're looking at the federal government saying, we have to cut this program. We don't have money for the vets. We don't have money for this. We don't have money for that. But then they're throwing out money like drunken sailors from other departments that they could use for the people here. Again, there's no reason for us to be funding wars over there. There's no reason for us to be, trying to prop up other people's economies, that type of thing, like in the Ukraine. We don't need to be there. I'd rather take care. That $400 million could have been very good into our healthcare and our retirement here. That type of thing. But anyway, tell me what you guys think of the idea of them making it mandatory to balance the budget. They're only talking federally. They haven't. If they did this provincially, we'd be in disaster mode right away. The provinces are in the disaster mode because again, the social programs are too big. We need to deregulate. Governments only make more laws. They don't ever get rid of laws, it seems. And this is, I think. At one point, you got to say to yourself, why do we need so much laws? Who does it really help? That type of thing. So I guess I'll leave it at that. So tell me what you guys think about this whole, mandatory balanced budget thing. Is it feasible? I don't think they'll stick to it. I think it's more done just for, election purposes. Right after the election, they'll be whatever. But all fairness, yes, they are keeping, we're like $3 billion away from a balanced budget. So you might as well say we've got a balanced budget. And now, they balanced the budget where they made the cuts. For example, you have Tom Moncaris out there talking about restoring the $150 million that the Conservative government cut from the CBC. I'm like, they only cut that much? And he wants to put that back. Meanwhile, complaining that, we're not spending enough in healthcare and retirement, but yet he wants to waste that money on the CBC. The CBC should be privatized, period. Let other people compete, that type of thing. Deregulate it a bit. In all sectors, like all sectors, like cut down, cut down the red tape. That's the problem. It's the system binds itself. The bigger the government gets, the more dysfunctional it gets. Parkinson's law. If you ever get a chance to read the book or listen to things on Parkinson's law, I highly, highly recommend you. It'll make you laugh. It'll make you cry. It's so. And this was a guy in the 1800s, and he's pretty much described every job place today. It just nothing changes, nothing changes. But it's just the bigger it is, the more dysfunctional it gets. So, and it's true. So yeah, anyway, I guess I'll leave it at that. I'm babbling now, but tell me what you guys think about it. If you like this kind of content, please consider making a donation. Thank you very much to everybody who has. Rate, subscribe, share, comment, like, be true to yourself, be true to others. Always do the right thing, and be careful while you're watching the show. You might actually learn something. Have yourselves a great day. Hey, hi, and welcome. Okay. Got like 2 inches of friggin' snow last night, April 9th. It sucks. Even worse, I have a bored dog. Hey, Goof. She's been sitting there with her jaw out the window for about a couple of hours now, just kind of, I don't want to go outside because it sucks. Hey, Goof. That weather's stupid, eh? Yeah. Well, you might as well take a nap. And it is +3, but it's so damn right now. Okay. Unlike many other countries on the planet right now, we're close to a balanced budget. Now, in this new budget, there's a new provision to make it illegal for governments, if there's other governments after, to actually run up a deficit, which is kind of more of a symbolistic thing. Here's why. The next government that gets in undoes that law. You know what I mean? But the idea is that federally, we don't go to the kind of the Trudeau years and the spend in the early 70s, and then by the end of the 70s, everybody's pretty much out of a job, and, big recession and stuff like that. So they don't want that to happen again. Now, the funny thing is that, yes, the conservative government is actually not conservative. They're socialist fascists is what they are. Business and state in bed together, or business and state in bed together, you have fascism. I mean, they're all, Harper's a globalist. He's not a conservative, he's a globalist. Most countries are globalist right now anyway, which is where most of our problems are coming from. These big corporations out there that keep getting bailouts and stuff like that, the reason why is because they keep so many people employed, but the problem with that is that if they were making money, a lot of these big corporations can't actually make money. If they're making money, it'd be no problem. But the thing is, as soon as they get into trouble, the government bails them out. Keep going, I've already petted you. I petted you. And she's extorting petting from me. But the idea is that, all these governments have basically used, driving their dollar to the bottom by everyday low prices of getting stuff built by the cheapest stuff from the lowest bidder, outsourcing all the labor of their countries and manufacturing and insourcing to undercut the labor. So it's no surprise when, country after country pretty much suffers like massive debt and just living on debt, And the other thing too is that there's no opportunities for people here. So if you were to say, okay, get rid of NAFTA, get rid of the North American Union, which is kind of in full swing. All these things come in under the radar. The average person has no idea, what happened to their job. As students can't find new work and stuff to get good jobs. That said, if your budget's balanced, most people won't notice that right away because, the taxes won't be as insane, stuff like that. So they are pretty much, for all intents and purposes, Canada does have a balanced budget. We were never that far over anyway, compared to any other country. Like 2008, yeah, we took a hit, like everybody else did, with all the bailouts and stuff like that. But the thing is that, we're a long way from Greece and Spain federally. Provincially, that's a different story. I mean, major cuts have to come to every province. And of course, you have people out there in Alberta. There's a lady who wants to run for the NDP saying, we got to invest in this, invest in that. She doesn't understand. You are broke now. You can't invest in anything. You have to cut. And I don't know which way it's going to go in Alberta, but I don't think the NDP is going to get as far as they think. Well, when people think of reality, it's like, okay, yeah, I get what they're saying, yeah, invest in schools and stuff like that, but you can only do that if you have the money to do it. And this is the same thing we're experiencing here in Quebec, is you have all these leftist students that are saying, don't cut our education, don't cut our education. They don't get it, that the government has spent like drunken sailors here, particularly the previous government. Look, because the Liberal government that was in Quebec got ousted by the Parti Québécois, Bloc Québécois, Parti Québécois. Yeah, they're two different parties, but they're the same thing,